What's up, my peoples? I had the day off.
Hamas has wounded us. They are responsible for all the destruction. All the destruction is on them. May God settle the score with Hamas, take revenge on Hamas. They destroyed our lives. These are the words of Palestinians in Gaza. Leaving Jabalia a couple of weeks ago, interviewed by Israeli journalist Ohad Chemo from Channel 12. These are the voices that Hamas and the members of the proposition don't want you to hear. These are the voices they want you to silence. We want you to rule, they say. We don't want Hamas. They took away the humanitarian aid. We will be killed if we say anything. The Jews bring us food, give us humanitarian corridor. May God take revenge on those who uprooted and killed us. Hamas.
I like real debates.
All of the falsehoods we have heard from the proposition this evening, their support for terror, the strengthening, essentially, of the oppressors, not just Hamas, but Hezbollah, the Houthis, other Iranian proxies in Iraq and in Syria. They oppress Palestinians and Israelis alike. Now, this disgraceful motion and the pretty shameful manner in which it has been handled this evening discredits this once illustrious institution. And that Jewish students have also felt intimidated from attending tonight is an extremely sad state of affairs. But I think anyone watching this debate will probably understand why. This is a dark moment in the Oxford Union's history, and as a member of this institution and a committed attendee in my time at this university, I think it is a very sad day on that front too. Now, those who cannot argue their case flee like cowards, like Norman Finkelstein, who pulled out at the last moment and in fact now seems to be scheduled to speak tomorrow unopposed, or like Mohammed Al-Kurd, who also, like a coward, left after his speech because he could not face the truth that you have heard
like Russia
from the
at the UN
benches. This debate has been predicated on a slew of falsehoods and misinformation. And in answer to the lady's point from the floor, red lines have been crossed this evening. I don't just refer to support for terrorism and to law enforcement watching. I do highlight Section 12(1)(a) of the Terrorism Act 2000, calling the 7th of October a heroic act.
Can I kill him and take the icon?
Is something that is and ought to be recognized as unlawful in this country. But we've also heard made-up facts, made-up allegations, made-up quotes. No, Ben-Gurion did not say that he wanted to expel the Arabs. He said that attackers would be removed. He called on the Arabs to join the Jews in building the state of Israel. And his quote was, "We do not want to expel the Arabs. We do not have to expel the Arabs." The Israeli Arab who was ejected from this chamber in a pretty shameful development and an exhibition of double standards, which unfortunately Israelis, both Jewish and Arab, have come to acknowledge and expect. He is proof of the 20% of Israel's population that are the only free Arabs in the Middle East, that live with full citizen rights, and that put the lie to everything that you have heard from the opposition this evening. I dream, in fact, of a day when people stop making up those falsehoods, those allegations, those lies, when people stop making up those quotes, because even Benny Morris acknowledged he was mistaken when he reported it. And a little bit of research, ladies and gentlemen, which is something this university is so good, I think, at instilling in its students, would have assisted the opposition substantially in this debate. We heard the essence, essentially, of the advice, the optimism from the opposition, from the proposition benches The Israelis, what should they do? They should live in Palestine and under Palestinian rule. We saw the result of 2 reservists losing their way and finding themselves in Ramallah in the year 2000. When they went to a local police station for help, they were lynched. Their livers were eaten. And that image of one of their attackers holding up his bloodied hands to the window towards the baying crowd below, that image of the red hand has been a central part of the propaganda initiative so that Hollywood members have been wearing red badges and celebrating the slaughter of Jews and urging it to continue.
Nope, that was the wrong button.
This is not a chicken and an egg scenario. This is not a situation, and we've heard so many examples from the proposition so far. Israel has done X, Y, Z, which have never been shown or been substantiated. The creation of the State of Israel in 1948 followed massacres of Jews. The Hebron massacre in 1929. In fact, Arabs have been massacring Jews in the Middle East for centuries. This is not a chicken and an egg scenario. But we have been asked for historical and we've been asked specifically for historical context, and what I'm going to provide to you is something that hasn't come up, which is extraordinary in the context of a discussion of 2 legal terms, genocide, apartheid. The lack of historical context and the lack of legal context has been palpable. But I am here, so fear not, ladies and gentlemen. Apartheid. Apartheid and genocide. Well, like colonialism, ethnic cleansing, occupation, all of the other blood libels that we've heard from the proposition benches this evening. The insidious nature of these allegations is that they take the victims of a crime and they accuse those victims of committing the very crime that was imposed on them. Apartheid is a prime example. Where is there apartheid in this region, ladies and gentlemen? If we just look at the area from the river to the sea, the West Bank, Palestinian-controlled territory, and yes, the Palestinians have self-governance. They have an autonomy after the Oslo Accords established in areas A and B, where that self-governance has meant that part of the world is Jew-free. Judenrein. You've heard that word before somewhere.
Judenfrei?
Jew-free also, as in Gaza, since Israel's withdrawal in 2005. Every Jew was ripped from their homes, even the dead ones were dug up, so that they could not be desecrated when that territory was handed over to Palestinian self-governance. There is apartheid, ladies and gentlemen. Herein is another perfect example of complete nonsense that seems to be opium for the masses.
What's up?
Gaza has a border with Egypt, and it is somewhere, unlike everyone who has spoken in this debate,
what about you guys?
I actually went to in September on the ground in Gaza and inspecting the tunnels that exist under the border between Gaza and the Egyptians. One of them was big enough to drive military-grade vehicles through. There was soot on the walls because of the vehicles that had come backwards and forwards, resupplying Hamas with Iranian military might right under Egyptian command tower. So I invite anyone who is taken in by this nonsense simply to look at a map. Apartheid, you have heard debunked by those that have grown up in Israel and experienced it, the opportunities that Israeli Arabs have. The lie is perpetrated by infantilizing the Palestinians and ignoring the self-governance that exists in Gaza, in the West Bank, and organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch lie about what the position is. They conflate Israeli Arabs, such as the gentleman who was ejected from this chamber. They conflate Israeli Arabs with those who have self-determination under the autonomy of the Palestinian Authority. But then we come to this obscene allegation of genocide. And yes, the term coined by the Jewish jurist S.T.A.L.K.E.R in the aftermath of the Holocaust to provide a legal terminology to the Jewish experience of being targeted because they were Jews for extermination. And when the proposition referred to the definition, they left out two very critical words: as such. This is to do with intentionally targeting a group as such, because of the group that they belong to. That was the Jewish experience in the Holocaust. It was also the experience of Jews on the 7th of October, when those acts that delusional third speaker referred to as heroic deliberately targeted Jews because they were Jews for rape, slaughter, torture, mutilation, and kidnap. If they cannot acknowledge that, they have much bigger problems than the ones that they profess to you this evening. Genocide is a slur being alleged against the real victims of genocide in this case, because it is providing a legal hook. A legal hook. I'm glad actually that there is an opportunity for someone to be heard that can speak about what the ICJ actually found so far in the genocide case. Because unlike the speakers who have been invited this term, including Husam Zumlot, who repeatedly lies about what was found by the International Court of Justice in their provisional measures order, and unfortunately he wasn't challenged when he was here as a guest earlier this term. The ICJ has not found that there is plausible genocide or a risk of plausible genocide or anything of the sort. And I honestly thought that after Joan Donoghue, the former president of the ICJ, went on hard talk on the BBC to correct this falsehood, it would stop being repeated, but clearly not in institutions like the Oxford Union. Genocide is simply the latest version of the blood libel that is being propagated against Jews because they are Jews. And it is a blood libel not because it is targeting Jews, but because it is false. It is the falsehoods that have been coming out of the proposition benches this evening that are nothing new, because unfortunately, the oldest hatred, the hatred of the Jews, goes hand in hand with lies about them. Then we have this notion of colonialism. When one considers who the indigenous people in that territory are, Jews, indigenous to Judea, the notion that Israel is a colonial entity is laughable. One only needs to look at the archaeology. One of the major focuses, though, of this allegation of genocide is the falsehoods that we've heard about the last 13 months of Israel's campaign against Hamas and other Palestinian terrorist groups in Gaza. And when I was there, I also witnessed the challenges that the IDF was dealing with. Civilian houses, booby-trapped in order to try and kill as many IDF soldiers as possible as they sweep through these areas seeking to evacuate civilians and target the Hamas who embed themselves in them. The notion that even the use of human shields that Hamas is proud of was disputed this evening starts to reveal the ridiculous position that the proposition have adopted. But there are root causes here, very important root causes that actually go hand in hand with all of the falsehoods that we have heard.
Well, the stash...
It is either
Dude, what is going on
being put
here?
to you from a position of ignorance, or there is something far more malicious behind the falsehoods that have been repeated, emphasized, embellished even over the course of this evening.
The falsehoods.
Indoctrination is at the core of the perpetuation of this conflict. When Palestinian kids are taught from kindergarten up that the highest calling in life is to slaughter as many Jews as possible and become a martyr, peace is being pushed further and further away. What nonsense? 3/4 of the terrorists who crossed the border on the 7th of October were educated in UNRWA-run schools. It is a matter of public record what the Palestinian Authority approved curriculum teaches in these UNRWA-run schools. And in fact, when I was on Trigonometry, the podcast, only a few months ago, they had the great initiative of playing some of Palestinian children's TV programs as part of that interview. This is material that many people, especially in this country, have never been exposed to. I encourage you to view it, because it will tell you everything that you need to know about the bloodlust and the terrorism and the indoctrination that is going to push this conflict on for decades more unless it is grappled with and unless the international community's complicity in it is likewise grappled with. But it is not just it is not just the indoctrination, but also the incentivization to terror. Forgive me, I'm going to take the same amount of time as those on the opposition benches. That means I've got another 5 minutes. We have heard very little this evening about the Palestinian Authority Pay for Slay program, which encourages terrorism by rewarding terrorists according to how many Jews they have slaughtered, the severity of their sentence, their time in Israeli prisons.
Wow, is that true?
And this is directly linked to the 7th of October, because Ali Kadhi and the others who spent 2 years organizing those attacks, there was nothing heroic about it, were paid salaries by the Palestinian Authority while they were organizing those barbarous medieval-style atrocities. The so-called moderates in this equation, really? They're also incentivizing the continuation of that genocidal war against the Jews. Now, one of the massive areas of misinformation this evening has been the issue of aid being provided by Israel into the Gaza Strip, being facilitated. I checked the COGAT website over the course of this debate. I had quite a lot of time on my hands, ladies and gentlemen. 1,149,932 tons of aid. That's 58,101 trucks. 1% of the international aid, the trucks that the international community has attempted to send into Gaza, Israel has stopped for security reasons. And the calorie count is significant because over 3,000 calories a day have been going into the Gaza Strip per individual day. Why? Why do we not hear criticism calling out of the causes of Palestinian suffering? The quotes that I read out to you at the very beginning of my speech
and then
were against Hamas. But it's not just Hamas that has contributed to this. Where is the condemnation of Egypt? Where are the calls for Egypt to comply with its international law obligations? Those that it signed up to in the African Union Convention on Refugees, that it acceded to in 1980, to open the border and allow the passage of civilians fleeing civil disorder in Gaza. Those are its international law obligations. I haven't heard anything from the proposition on that this evening, which is why I agree with the rest of my speakers. They don't care about the Palestinians. Their focus is on the eradication of the State of Israel, and they are peddling in blood libels to seek to achieve it. We had the speaker who left the debate, I mean, in and of itself, a rather shameful disregard for the tradition of the Oxford Union, referenced, in fact, his own case of Sheikh Jarrah, a property that was purchased in 1875 by 2 rabbis and put into family trust, that was then seized by Jordan when it ethnically cleansed the Jews of East Jerusalem and occupied that territory in 1948. That property that Mohammed S.T.A.L.K.E.R was referring to came into the hands of the Jordanian custodian of enemy property. And instead of transferring the ownership of that property, which would have later even been respected, albeit being unlawful, forgive me, but the other speakers had quite a deal longer. I've been keeping time, 20 minutes on the last count. So that Jordanian custodian of enemy property issued a couple of leases over it. Now, leases require rent and they require compliance with the conditions. Neither of those have been forthcoming from the first speaker from the opposition and his cohabitants. Illegal squatters who have been given time after time, in fact 50 years of litigation by the courts in Israel, an opportunity to get their house in order. But of course they have no regard to the law, they have no regard to the facts. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have seen on display this evening is a continuation and a perpetuation of the falsehoods against Israel in order to draw you into those falsehoods. There have been references to useful idiots this evening in response to some of the comments.
Useful idiots.
I do not believe that you are useful idiots. You would not be at this institution if you were.
They absolutely would be, actually.
Secretary, give the speaker 1 more minute the same way.
Well, I was going to go to the end of the time of the previous speaker because I stick to rules and precedent. Let us not be under any illusions here. We all know what this audience is, where your allegiances lie. You've made that very plain this evening. We all know what the outcome of this vote is going to be. That is not important. What is important is that ultimately the truth will out. What is important is that all of those Jewish students who were too intimidated to come tonight will have an opportunity to come not only to hear the truth in future, but in future to speak the truth. And that will be occasioned because brave members of the opposition benches this evening have called out the falsehoods, have called out the lies, in the face of opposition, even from the union authorities in organizing this debate. The shame of this evening, I hope, will be overcome, because in future years, there will be debates where the rules, procedure, and decorum are respected, and there will be debates when it is not just the speakers here on the opposition that are calling out these falsehoods and that are seeking a peace and a future built on real history, real law, real facts. Thank you.
Good job, lady. That was the pro side. That was the pro, is the Israel, not genocide side.
Before I start, I will not be taking any points of information, so kindly refrain from interrupting me. Addressing the challenge of what to do about the indigenous inhabitants of the land, Chaim Weizmann, a Russian Jew, said to the World Zionist Congress in 1921 that Palestinians were akin to, quote, the rocks of Judea, obstacles that had to be cleared on a difficult path. David Grun, a Polish Jew who changed his name to David Ben-Gurion in order to sound relevant to the region, said, quote, we must expel the Arabs and take their places. There are thousands of such conversations among the early Zionists who plotted and implemented the violent colonization of Palestine and the annihilation of her native people. But they were only partially successful, murdering or ethnically cleansing 80% of the Palestinians, which meant that 20% of us remained, an enduring obstacle to their colonial fantasies, which became the subject of their obsessions in the decades that followed, especially after conquering what remained of Palestine in 1967. Zionists lamented our presence, and they debated publicly in all circles regarding what to do about us, about the Palestinian birth rate, about our babies, which they dubbed a demographic threat. Benny Morris, who was meant to be here originally, once publicly expressed that David Ben-Gurion, that David Ben-Gurion, quote, did not finish the job of getting rid of us all, which would have obviated what they referred to as the Arab problem. Benjamin Netanyahu, a Polish Jew whose real name is Benjamin Milakowski, bemoaned a missed opportunity during the 1989 Tiananmen Square uprising to expel large swaths of Palestinian population, quote, while the world's attention was focused on China. Some of their articulated solutions to the nuisance of our existence included a, quote, break their bones policy in the 1980s and 90s, which was ordered by Yitzhak Lubittsov, a Ukrainian Jew who changed his name to Yitzhak Rabin for the same reasons. That horrific policy that crippled generations of Palestinians did not succeed in making us leave, and frustrated by Palestinian resilience, a new discourse arose, especially after a massive natural gas field was discovered off the coast of northern Gaza worth trillions of dollars. This new discourse is echoed in the words of Colonel Ephraim Itan, who said in 2004, quote, we have to kill them all. Aaron Sofer, an Israeli so-called intellectual and political advisor, insisted in 2018 that, quote, we have to kill and kill and kill all day, every day.
So some
When I was
guys.
in Gaza this year, I saw a little boy no more than 9 years whose hands and part of his face had been blown off by a booby-trapped can of food that soldiers had left behind for Gaza's starving children. I later learned that they also had left poisoned food for people in Shuja'iyya. And in the 1980s, and 90s, Israeli soldiers had left booby-trapped toys in southern Lebanon that exploded when excited children picked them up. The harm they do is diabolical, and yet they expect you to believe that they are the victims. Invoking Europe's Holocaust and screaming anti-Semitism, they expect you to suspend fundamental human reason to believe that the daily sniping of children is so-called kill shots, that the bombing of entire neighborhoods that bury
From the
families
noise
alive
this time.
and
I don't
wipe out
think I
whole
need any.
bloodlines is self-defense. They want you to believe that a man who had not eaten a thing in over 72 hours, who kept fighting even when all he had was one functioning arm, that this man was motivated by some innate savagery and irrational hatred or jealousy of Jews, rather than the indomitable yearning to see his people free in their own homeland. It is clear to me that we are not here to debate whether Israel is an apartheid or genocidal state. This debate is ultimately about the worth of Palestinian lives. It's about the worth of our schools, our research centers, our books, our art. It's about the worth of the homes we worked all our lives to build and which contain memories of generations. It's about the worth of our humanity and our agency, of our bodies and our ambitions. Because if the roles were reversed, if Palestinians had spent the last 8 decades stealing Jewish homes, expelling, oppressing, imprisoning, poisoning, torturing, killing, raping them, if Palestinians had killed an estimated 300,000 Jews in 1 year, targeted their journalists, their thinkers, their healthcare workers, their athletes, their artists, bombed every Israeli hospital, university, library, museum, cultural center, synagogue, and simultaneously set up an observation platform where citizens came to watch their slaughter as if a tourist attraction. If Palestinians had corralled them by the hundreds of thousands into flimsy tents, bombed them in so-called safe zones, burned them alive, cut off their food and water and medicine, if Palestinians made their children wander barefoot with empty pots, made them gather the flesh of their parents into plastic bags, bury their siblings, their cousins, their friends, made them sneak out from their tents at night to sleep on their parents' graves, made them pray for death, just to join their families and not be alone in this terrible world. If we terrorize them so utterly that their children lose their hair, lose their memory, lose their minds, and made those as young as 4 and 5 die of heart attacks, if we mercilessly force their NICU babies to die, alone in hospital beds, crying until they could cry no more, died and decomposed in the same spot. If Palestinians used wheat flour, a truck, to lure starving Jews, then opened fire on them as they gathered to collect the day's bread. If Palestinians finally allowed a food delivery into a shelter with hungry Jews, then set fire to the entire shelter and a truck before anyone could taste a bite of the food. If a Palestinian sniper bragged about blowing out
Okay,
42 Jewish kneecaps in one day, as one Israeli soldier did in 2019. If a Palestinian admitted to CNN that he ran over hundreds of Jews with his tank, their squished flesh lingering in the tank treads. If Palestinians were systematically raping Jewish doctors, patients, and other captives with hot metal rods, jagged and electrified sticks, and fire extinguishers, sometimes raping them to death, as happened with Dr. Adnan al-Bursh and others. If Jewish women were forced to give birth in filth, get C-sections or leg amputations without anesthesia, if we destroyed their children, then decorated our tanks with their toys, if we killed or displaced their women, then posed in their lingerie, if the world were watching the live-streamed systematic annihilation of Jews in real time, there would be no debating whether that constituted terrorism or genocide. And yet, two Palestinians, myself and Mohammed al-Kurd, showed up here to do just that, enduring the indignity of debating those who think our only life choices should be to leave our homeland, submit to their supremacy, or die quietly and politely. But you would be wrong to think that I came to convince you of anything. This House resolution, though well-meaning and appreciated, is of little consequence in the midst of this Holocaust of our time. I came in the spirit of Malcolm X and Jimmy Baldwin, both of whom...
Wait, she's American, isn't she?
Both of whom stood here and in Cambridge before I was born, facing finely dressed, well-spoken monsters who harbored the same supremacist ideologies as Zionism. These notions of entitlement and privilege, of being divinely favored or blessed or chosen. I'm here for the sake of history, to speak to generations not yet born, and for the chronicles of this extraordinary time where the carpet bombing of defenseless indigenous societies is legitimized. And I also came to speak directly to Zionists here and everywhere. We let you into our homes when your own countries tried to murder you, and everyone else turned you away. We fed you, and we clothed you, we gave you shelter, and we shared from the bounty of our land with you. And when the time was right, you kicked us out of our homes and homeland. Then you killed and robbed and burned and looted our lives.
789 drop.
You carved out our hearts.
859.
Because it is clear that you do not know how to live in the world without dominating others.
704 drop.
You have crossed all lines. You have crossed all lines and nurtured the most vile of human impulses. But the world is finally glimpsing the terror we have endured at your hands for so long.
50.
And they are seeing the reality of who you are and who you've always been. They watch in utter astonishment the sadism, the glee, the joy, and the pleasure with which you conduct, watch, and cheer the daily details of breaking our bodies, our minds, our future, and our past. But no matter what happens from here, no matter what fairy tales you tell yourselves and tell the world, you will never truly belong to that land. You will never understand the sacredness of the olive trees, which you've been cutting down and burning for decades. Just...
Why would they do that?
Interrupt the speaker. The secretary has been generous to both sides of the house. Order, please. Order. You've made your point of order. Order. The Secretary has been generous in extending time to both sides of the House. So I will not be hearing this point of order again. Please, order. The point of order had been heard. I'm not hearing any more about this. Could I listen to Susanna?
You will never understand the sacredness of the olive trees, which you've been cutting down and burning for decades, just to spite us, just to break our hearts a little more. No one native to that land would dare do such a thing to the olives. No one who belongs to that region would ever bomb or destroy such ancient heritage as Baalbek or S.T.A.L.K.E.R, or destroy ancient cemeteries as you destroy ours, like the Anglican cemetery in Jerusalem, or the resting place of the ancient Muslim scholars and warriors in Ma'manillah. Those who come from that land do not desecrate the dead. That's why my family, for centuries, were the caretakers of the Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives.
Dude, you have
as
an
labors
American
of faith
accent.
and care for
What are you-
what we know
what are you talking
is part
about?
of our ancestry and our story. Your ancestors will always be buried in your actual homelands of Poland, Ukraine, and elsewhere around the world whence you came, and Yemen. The mythos
I don't know. Could you please not speak unless it's secret?
The mythos,
You're right. I'm not hearing this point. I'm not hearing this point. If you would like me to point of order, you have to stand and say, I've heard this point of order and I'm not hearing it. Please continue.
I am a white collar as well. I am. My brown self.
Order. Susanna will be heard. Order. Please show as much courtesy to the speaker as he has showed everyone else. Susanna.
the mythos and the folklore of the land will always be alien to you. You will never be literate in the sartorial language of the thobes we wear, which sprang from the land through our foremothers over centuries. Every motif, every design and pattern speaking to the secrets of local lore, flora, birds, rivers, and wildlife. What your real estate agents call in their high-priced listings, quote, old Arab home charm, will always hold in their stones the stories and memories of our ancestors who built them. The ancient paintings and photos of the land will never contain you. You will never know how it feels to be loved and supported by those who have nothing to gain from you and in fact everything to lose. You will never know the feeling of masses all over the world pouring into the streets and stadiums to chant and sing for your freedom. And it is not because you are Jewish, as you want everyone to believe, but because you are violent colonizers who think that your Jewishness...
I'm not violent, and I'm not a colonizer. You're not speaking. And I know much more than you think.
Order. The speaker will be heard in silence. Order, please. The House will come to order. The speaker on proposition has shown courtesy to all the speakers of them. She has not made a single statement throughout the day. I will not be hearing this. It is just past the 16-minute mark, which is the same as Suzanne.
Because you are violent colonizers who think your Jewishness entitles you to the home my grandfather and
It's
his
so
brothers
melodramatic,
built with
especially
their own
compared to the
hands
first one.
on land that had been in our family for centuries. It is because Zionism is a blight onto Judaism. It is a break in humanity. You can change your names to sound relevant to the region, and you can pretend that falafel and hummus and za'atar are your ancient cuisines. But in the recesses of your being, you will always feel the sting of this epic forgery. That's why even the drawings of our children hung on the wall at the UN or in a hospital ward send your leaders and lawyers into hysteric meltdowns. You will not erase us, no matter how many of us you kill and kill and kill all day, every day. We are not the rocks that Chaim Weizmann thought you could clear from the land. We are its very soil. We are her rivers and her trees and her stories, because all of that was nurtured by our bodies and our lives over millennia of continuous, uninterrupted habitation of that patch of earth between the Jordan and Mediterranean waters. From our Canaanite, our Hebrew, our Philistine, our Phoenician ancestors, to every conqueror or pilgrim who came and went, who married or raped or loved or settled or enslaved or converted between religions or prayed in that land, leaving pieces of themselves in our bodies and our heritage. The fabled, tumultuous stories of the land are quite literally in our DNA. You cannot kill or propagandize that away, no matter what death technology you use or what Hollywood or corporate media arsenals you deploy. Someday, your impunity and your arrogance will end. Palestine
This isn't a debate. This is just rhetoric,
She
by
will
the way.
be restored to her multi-religious, multi-ethnic, pluralistic glory. We will restore and expand the trains that run from Cairo to Gaza, Jerusalem, Haifa, Tripoli, Beirut, Damascus, Amman, Kuwait, Sana'a, and so on. We will put an end to the Zionist American war machine of domination, expansion, extraction, pollution, and looting.
This has nothing to
And
do with
you
reality. I don't know.
will
She's
either
just
leave
saying
or you
words.
will finally learn to live with others as equals. Thank you.
America bad. That's all. White people bad. Good job.
Oh, we're having fun already, I see. Well, first of all, I'm glad that you brought, Mr. President, the uploading to the social media, because get this. Listen to this.
I don't know. You got a translator? I don't know that language.
I understand, I'll translate, don't worry. It's for the majority of Arab speakers here. Okay, this is a Palestinian, not affiliated with Hamas according to what he says, just a citizen. And he's saying, Dad, Allahu Akbar, I just killed 10 Jews. I have their blood on my hand. I stole her phone. I'm speaking with you from her phone. This is a Palestinian, which you will call a civilian if the IDF eliminates.
God.
So, this is one of the many videos that Hamas uploaded, and they themselves were proud of killing, guess what, Arabs and Jews in the 7th of October. And just before I start actually my speech, you know, it's funny, Mr. President, you as an Egyptian talking about the land of Palestine and stalling. You know, back in 1948, when the Arabs did not agree to the partition plan and the Jews did, and they opened the war and they lost the war. They lost the war, but you know what? They kept the West Bank and they kept Gaza. Do you know who actually ruled Gaza between 48 to 67 and who ruled the West Bank between 48 to 67? No, not Israel. It was Egypt in Gaza and it was Jordan illegally in the West Bank. Now, here's a question, rhetorical one, because I really don't care about your answer. From 48 to 67, you as an Egyptian,
decide it for myself.
you should know that Egypt controlled Gaza, yet they never offered a state to the Palestinians to take, which right now they are actually fighting for. They're also fighting for the West Bank. They're fighting for borders of 67. That's at least what the Palestinian Authority wants. ones. Not like Muhammad al-Kurd and all the distinguished speakers who wants the annihilation of Israel from the river to the sea, right? But here's the thing, how much I bet with you that you have no clue which river and which sea, but you are like zombies. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Listen carefully. If you want to free Palestine, first free Palestine from Hamas. First free Palestine from the terrorists. So, of course, Booz, here's the thing. If I say free Palestine from Hamas and you actually booing, then guys, I'm sorry to tell you, you are a terror supporters. Point. That is the point. Now, when I'll give you, I promise you, I'll give you. I'll tell you what, I thought by giving point of information, it means that the speaker is brave and he's not afraid to speak. Apparently, the president here is such a coward that he couldn't even take one point of view. But don't worry, I will allow you. Nico, stop tape. In Arabic we say sidniat, in Hebrew says stamtape.
This is a debate. That's not. She just walked through the crowd with a kafefa or whatever. Protest of his facts.
This is the second time that this speaker has been booed, which is important.
I'm fully aware of the forms of the House, and I will do my best to make sure that the speakers learn the silence. Thank you.
To be honest with you, I'm not surprised, and in
Pay up your
fact,
debt to
when
Warlock
everybody say, I hope...
Promise me a cut. Well, I was going to pay him back.
Speakers on the opposition, please avoid the hostility towards members of the House, just for the sake of continuing.
Time to keep on. Yours and Warlock's.
All right, so, basically, what we're talking about... Yeah.
I think members of the opposition will afford the same courtesy to members of the House as they receive.
Thank you. All right. Now, just to make one very obvious statement, everybody is saying the House should vote. I hope the House will vote, as if we already don't know what the House is going to vote tonight. But you know why I'm here? I'm here, one, just to show you that we are not afraid to confront all those anti-Israeli lawyers who twist the facts and lie time after time. And what's so crazy is that the majority of you have never been in the land of Israel, have never lived in the land of Israel, and then you have the audacity to come to speak to an Arab who was born in Haifa, the largest mixed city in Israel, raised in Nazareth, one of the largest Arab city in Israel, and then you get the audacity to tell me if I live under apartheid regime. Shame on you. You have no clue what you're talking about. So allow me, in order for me to actually explain what's going on. Thank you. Let's go back to my childhood. I'm an Arab Israeli born in Haifa, largest mixed city in Israel, where you have Christians, Muslims, Druze, and Jews living in the city. At age 3, I moved to Nazareth with my parents, which is the largest Arab city in Israel back then. Today it's Rahat. And the way I grew up because, being with Jews and Arabs together, playing football together. That's what we like. And because we were playing football in the largest mixed city in Haifa, we had Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Druze playing together. And do you think at the age of 11, 12, we cared that this guy is a Jew or this guy is an Arab? We just wanted to play football together, and that's what we did. And step by step, we start going out together, drinking, even inviting each other to holidays. Yes, for instance, Christmas, then the Christian friends would invite the Jews and the Muslims and the Druze to see the holidays of Christmas, for instance. Whether it was Eid al-Adha, then the Muslims or the Druze would invite the Jews, and the Christians and the Jews would invite them to see each other and how is those holidays going together. And yes, when it was Passover, then the Jews would invite the Christians and the Muslims and the Druze to see the holidays. This is how we bridge gaps. Additionally, we wanted to learn Hebrew and we wanted to learn Arabic because language, you bridge gaps. This is how I grew up. And when I arrived to the age of 16, I asked myself a very simple question because I saw that my Druze men friend and the Jewish friends are starting their enlistment to the IDF. Now, I asked the question, why I am not serving in the IDF? Apparently, some people do not realize that Arab Christians and Arab Muslims are not obligated to serve in the IDF, but if you want, you can volunteer. I decided to volunteer and serve in the IDF. Many people ask me, why did you choose to take that decision and actually serve in the IDF? I said, guys, it's in the initials. It's the IDF, it's not the JDF. And IDF means Israeli Defense Forces and not Jewish Defense Forces. And when Hamas and Hezbollah and the Iranian regime attack Israel, they attack all the citizens of Israel. And when the IDF protects Israel, the IDF protects all the citizens of Israel, whether you want it or not. This is how I looked at it, and this is how exactly it was. And then when I arrived at the age of 18, just a month and a half before the beginning of my service, a person came to me and said, Yusuf, are you absolutely sure that this is the way and the path you want to take?
Oh, hell yeah.
And I said 100% yes. That was about, thank you very much. I'm very proud of that, Shame. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
This
I'm really proud of that,
based...
Shame. Now,
dude.
And I said yes. I'm 100% sure that this is the way that I want to take. All this was right up until the 4th of October 2003. On the 4th of October 2003, which is a month and a half before my beginning of the service, a Palestinian female suicide bomber entered the Maxim restaurant in Haifa and blew up that restaurant. It's a restaurant co-owned by Arabs and Jews. People from Arabs and Jews are eating there, working there. The devastating result of that terror attack, 21 Israelis were murdered, Arabs and Jews. Over 50 were injured, Arabs and Jews. Arabs and Jews were killed because of that Palestinian terrorist. From that moment, I realized one thing. My decision wasn't 100%. It became 1,000,000%. And I knew that serving in the IDF is not only the right thing, but it's the most moral thing to protect my society. And when I say my society, I'm not talking about the Jewish society. I'm talking about the Israeli society, where you have Jews and Arabs together. And you can shout shame as much as you want, as I told you. I am so proud in every decision that I took to protect my country, to protect my society, and to protect my people from terrorist organizations like Hamas, who time after time kill Arabs and Jews. Now,
hella based.
After a year, I become a commander. I, as an Arab, was a commander over Jewish soldiers in the IDF. Take that, apartheid. You're talking about apartheid. I gave orders to Jewish soldiers to do exactly what an Arab IDF soldiers said to do. And then, as I said, you keep shouting shame. I'm proud of that, proud of that, proud of that, proud of that. I do want the time when they shout shame. Now, here's the thing. I'm gonna actually give you a point. One time I was in a lecture, and I gave exactly this point where I said, I'm an Arab, I commanded over Jewish soldiers in the IDF. And then some anti-Israeli zombie get up and says, Yusuf, you are an absolute sucker. You know why? And I said, why?
Why am I stuck?
Because once there is no use of you, you're an Arab, the Jews will kick you and throw you to the garbage. That's what has been told to me in front of 500 students. When there is no use of you, the Jews will throw you. Everybody started cheering there from the anti-Israelis, clapping and like having fun. And I say, this is really interesting. Because you know what?
Okay, what does it
I have
say?
a story where actually there was no use of me. And in fact, not only there was no use of me, but saving me is putting Jewish lives in danger. Now, according to this anti-Israeli, this is the perfect time. I do need to finish this story. They interrupted me too many times.
5, 6, so I can drop 2 of these.
As I said, this 12, person 10, who said to me that Jews will throw you the garbage, 15. Then based on his idea, this is exactly the best time to do it. Throw me to the garbage. But instead of that, 4 soldiers put me on a stretcher. Yes, because I participated in the Second Lebanon War. Fight Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, and I was injured 4 days before ceasefire. At that time when I was injured badly, and knowing that Hezbollah is going to target the rescue mission, the Jewish soldiers there, they should have thrown me to the garbage according to him. But instead of that, they put me on a stretcher, lifted it up, backed up with another 4 Jewish soldiers, run 3 kilometers, under fire when an RPG goes above your head, and literally bringing me to safety, saving my life. They didn't have to do that according to any things that you think about. Everybody talking about the relationship between the Arabs and Jews, and let me tell you why I'm so positive, so strong voice about that. Because while you bullshitting about what's going on, I felt it. I smelled it. I tasted it. I saw it. I heard it. It happened to me. You want to lie? Keep lying. But the simple fact is, when you arrive and speak about
I'm not at the max. I should be able to move.
you need to understand that when you talk about apartheid,
I just need to find somebody to sell the rest of the shit to.
Or you be quiet. Because according to Amnesty International, Israel is making an apartheid regime from the river to the sea, including the 2 million Arab Israelis, which is a blended lie from the river to the sea. Because here, this is me. This is me.
Okay, I guess
winning actually an honorary doctorate from the University of Ariel. When you talk about academics.
This guy's also doing the rhetoric. I mean, he's got really good points, though.
Judge
you say it's
sent to prison a Jewish prime minister and
say
a Jewish
that
president for committing crimes. Both of them were Jews. An Arab judge sent to prison a Jewish prime minister and a Jewish president to jail. You see this MK? This MK is the most anti-Israeli member of Knesset in Israel. Yet this MK earns $10,000 from the taxpayer. Most of them comes from a Jew. And he has the right to talk about Israel as much as he wants. If he lived in apartheid, he would be in jail right now. And how about...
He's making the point that it's not
what's so
apartheid.
There's a stereotype. They say the Jews control the money. Jews control the money. Well, guess what? Samir Haj Yahya is an Arab Muslim from the city of Taibeh. You know what's so amazing about Samir Haj Yahya? Should I say Dr. Samir Haj Yahya? He was the head of the largest bank in Israel. An Arab Muslim is the head of the largest bank in Israel in a stereotype where you see that the Jews control the money. And how about this guy? I'll finish. I'm going to finish.
Okay.
I'm going to finish.
I hit max.
But I had point of order.
It's worth 10,000.
Annie, let's take the microphone a little bit. Thank you for that.
1,000,
and I'll try to
1,200,
be less
1,000.
intensive, but you obviously understand how it is important when I stand in front of you, knowing my reality, and when there are a bunch of people that never been in Israel and telling me my reality, of course I would be a little bit with over motivation and talking like this. Let's continue about the Israeli apartheid. Look at this. This is Anan Khalaili. He's an Arab Muslim playing for the Israeli football team. Not only that, when he played for the under-19 Israeli soccer team, he finished as the top scorer, where Israel achieved an unbelievable achievement, finishing third in football. This is crazy, I'm telling you. Now, before I finish, here's what you will not going to hear. What you're not going to hear from our nice gentlemen and opponents here, you will not hear them talking about this person. I'm not even sure that they know who is this person. Do you have any idea, Mr. President? Anybody? Anybody has idea who is this? Of course not. You know, this is Islam Hijazi. She was killed with more than 90 bullets by Hamas.
Jesus.
Because she
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
she was responsible
6, 7,
for giving
8,
aid.
9,
and when Hamas,
10,
the terrorists,
11,
came to
12,
take this aid
13,
and she
14,
refused,
15,
they
16,
shot her.
17,
You know what's so
18,
crazy?
19,
They did not
20,
deny it. Whoever calling me liar, Hamas did not
22,
deny it,
23,
you
24,
useful idiots.
25,
Well,
26,
you know,
27,
but here's the story.
28, 29,
You will never,
30,
never
31,
ever talk about
32,
it.
33,
But here is
34,
my
36,
and here is my last
37,
point about the
38,
apartheid, about the
39,
relationship of the
41,
Arabs and the
42,
Jews.
43.
Does anybody of you even know who they are? Yusuf and Hamza? Yusuf and Hamza are Arab Muslim Israelis who were kidnapped by the terrorist organization Hamas on the 7th of October and still held hostages over 415 days. This is the reality. And if you think, and look at this person here booing the Arab Muslims. So do you understand the reality, huh? There is a person here that booing Arab Muslims being held hostage by the terrorist organization Hamas. This is absolutely unbelievable. And this is my last comment, because I know that I've been here because of this interruptings. Now, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, just to let you know, if anybody, because I've heard here someone saying collaborator, I really don't want you. I don't want you. I've heard that someone called me here collaborator. I really urge you not to insult Nico Pellet, please. That's one. And second, to refer to the genocide act that you're talking about. There's a reason why all of you, or the majority of you, talking about 40,000. Ask yourself one question. Why you never differentiate between combatants and civilians? Why you always bringing 40,000, 40,000? Once you start realizing that the IDF managed to eliminate more than 10,000 terrorists, you will understand what's something called the ratio. In war, unfortunately, that Hamas started, whether you like it or you don't like it. I know. No, they're booing me, and I can't finish.
Oh, they're so mad.
Finish.
Order.
I want to finish.
Order. Could I ask the speaker to conclude?
I really want to finish. Guys, I really want to finish. Keep booing me, and I'm going to keep going. Go. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not, what is happening in Gaza today, what is happening in the war that you, it means Hamas and their supporters, started, and now they're crying, it's only because of the simple fact that you are losing. You're losing the Lebanese, you're losing the Arab world, you're losing every single thing that you thought that you can win. And you know why you're losing? I'm done. He
has been very generous with this time. I asked you to respect the rules of the House.
I'm fine.
What are the rules?
Four less words. You know what you're losing because you thought you could destroy Israel, but Israel is here to stay.
Wild. Okay. Who's next?
Thank you.
I gotta find Hamster. He's got some stuff for me to trade.
The Secretary has been very generous in giving his time to the first opposition speaker, so I hope he would show me as much generosity in my speech.
You are Savi?
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of this House, guests,
Fima?
there is a truth that we must all grapple with as we debate this issue tonight. And that is that since October 2023, a Palestinian civilian has been murdered every 15 minutes. I put it to you tonight that they have been murdered by an apartheid state intent on genocide.
Finally, you get a
To use the words
Palestinian
of the
voice.
United Nations, this is more than a humanitarian crisis. It is a crisis that is shaking the world, rattling the region, and tragically destroying so many lives. Gaza, in the words of the UN Secretary General, is a graveyard of children, journalists, and aid workers. And over 40,000 deaths later in this genocide, a motion such as tonight's is still seen as controversial, as risky, as going too far, or being too biased. The motion tonight does so much and so little at the same time. It changes nothing for the Palestinians if this motion passes. But it is at least an acknowledgement of the horror and
is
of
he
the
inside this
unconscionable
building that I
violence
can't
that
get
they are
into?
suffering every single day. It puts the correct
on the roof or
names
something?
on self-evident truth. And most of all, it is a reminder of how difficult it is for Palestinians to tell the world that their land is occupied and stolen and that their people are being massacred.
It's in front of the house.
Let me start by telling you about a young boy called Shaban. He was as young as many of the freshers in this room, a 19-year-old
really
engineering
debates.
student. He was forced away from his home
Where's
in central Gaza due to incessant bombing by Israeli forces. Shaban cared about helping his people. He donated blood at hospital, even though it was bombed several times in targeted annihilation campaigns. He filmed videos begging the world to stop the genocide whilst being surrounded by the dystopian nightmare of death after death happening in his own community. It was only a few days from his 20th birthday. For 5 months, Shaban lived with his family in Gaza. 2 sisters, 2 brothers, and his parents. They were living in a tent in freezing temperature. He was trying to find a way to escape Gaza. He recorded videos describing his family's life under bombs, and his family were injured and displaced 5 times. The hospital where he found internationally recognized refuge was bombed, and Shaban was injured. His mother suffered the same. He was hooked up to an IV and connected to a drip. And then he was bombed again as he was being
treated.
This was a bomb that, without account, destroyed a hospital full of injured civilians. And in that bomb, Sha'ban and his mother burned to death.
Who went up to the center
He was
of the
filmed
zone
trying to claw his way out of the fire. Sha'ban's story is harrowing and it is chilling, but I'm afraid it is not unique. Sidra Hassouna was a 7-year-old girl whose corpse was found mutilated, hanging by a wall of a damaged building in the Gaza Strip. Her legs severed and blown off, despite it being in an area designated by Israel as a so-called temporary safe zone. Another 6-year-old girl, Hind Rajab. Her and her family had 335 rounds fired at them from an Israeli tank as they were fleeing Gaza. How many bullets do you need to kill one family? 335. Hind was the sole survivor, and she made a call which lasted for about 3 hours. Rejected. She was begging, rejected. She was begging rescue workers to come and save her. Stranded inside, Hind was surrounded by the corpses of her uncle and 4 of her cousins. She said in the call to the rescue workers, "They are dead. The tank is next to me." 6-year-old girl. Hind was killed along with the 2 paramedics who were there to save her. Now I could keep going on, rejected. I could keep going on and on and on with stories like this, but why should I? I don't need to do that. The opposition's star speaker rejects the idea of Palestinian ethnicity. He even said, and I quote, "Muslims do not exist. Do not trust anyone who identifies as a Muslim." He said again, and I quote, "When will Israel finally annex the West Bank?" He argued that Israel should burn down Rafah. Sitting beside him, Mr. Haddad here. He said, and I quote, "Civilians in Gaza are slowly starting to break down. Let's break them. We're almost there." There where? No, you will get your chance. You will get 10 minutes to speak. Thank you. So of course, they do not believe that there is a genocide or that apartheid is being practiced. Because on the one hand, there is no one to kill because they are not humans. And on the other hand, they deserve collective punishment. And therefore, all of this is justified. All of it. Punishing Palestinians by cutting food and water, according to both the EU and Oxfam. Killing a record number of aid workers in Gaza, according to the New York Times. Torturing civilians by forcing rods into their private parts, according to the New York Times and UNRWA. Ladies and gentlemen, the onus on the opposition in this debate is to persuade you of 2 things. Firstly, that Israel is responsible for genocide. And secondly, that Israel is an apartheid state. The definition of genocide under the Genocide Convention refers to acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Those acts can include killing, causing serious harm, inflicting conditions calculated to bring physical destruction, and imposing measures to prevent birth. Now let us start, rejected. You'll have your say. Let us start with intent. The Israeli government could not have been clearer on their intention in the war in Gaza. In fact, the Israeli leadership on every occasion admitted their genocidal intent and then followed through with blatant dehumanization and indiscriminate bombing campaigns. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant described Palestinians as human animals. He called for a total siege on Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu described Gaza as the city of evil. He then framed Israel's attacks as a fight against monsters. Now I want you to imagine calling an area where 50% of the residents are children and youth as animals, as evil, and as monsters. 50% youth and children.
Oh
that is what
we're getting the attachments.
Prime Minister rejected.
I want
that is what
gas
the Prime Minister,
mask, I guess. What is it
Mr.
for?
Mossab here had referred to as leading an accountable leadership. He called them animals, evil, and
radiation
monsters.
protection.
Now just this week, Finance Minister Smotrich, he told a group of Israeli settlers that the population of Gaza should be drastically reduced, that it is possible to create a situation
I'm starting to understand
where
this.
Gaza's population will be half
Alright, we have a
of its
viewer.
current size.
It's good to see you.
Now, honestly, when you hear comments like this from Smotrich and from Netanyahu, it is not difficult to see where the opposition gets their inspiration.
Kills the cats.
Netanyahu, who is now a wanted war criminal, invoked Amalek. Thank you. Thank you. Netanyahu, who is now a wanted war criminal, invoked Amalek as Israeli forces prepared the ground invasion of Gaza. Amalek refers to the historical destruction of a group of people by Israelites. The International Court of Justice recently received evidence that this genocidal rhetoric fueled the Israeli ground offensive, with soldiers using these genocidal, dehumanized attitudes in their raids. In fact, on December 7th, 2023, Israeli soldiers used the Prime Minister's reference to Amalek to justify the killing of civilians, including so many children. Now, Israel claims now that they did not mean their statements literally. They say they now are trying to blame their soldiers for misinterpreting these statements. Rejected. This has been refused in South Africa's ICJ case, where it showed that the orders to destroy and maim originated from high command. In other words, that they carried out official Israeli state policy. Now, what is ironic is that not very long ago, Israel signed onto a statement led by the UK on human rights violations to Uyghur minorities in Xinjiang. Now, that did not have mass casualties, but instead it had mass detainment, forced re-education, and cultural erasure. If Israel can call out a genocide outside of the Middle East, then they must look first to their own bombing, their depopulation, and the mass killing with intent of Palestinians. On conservative estimate, there are about 40,000 civilians dead or beneath the rubble. But this does not even begin to account for the thousands, the tens of thousands who have died by starvation, malnutrition, lack of medication, and unsanitary living conditions. I invite all of you to think about this. Oxford University has about 26,000 students. Imagine every student in Oxford bombed to death. All of us. Mostly young people bombed to death. Now imagine double that. 2 Oxford universities, all of them bombed to death, with so many thousands under rubble. Now imagine a place with thousands of years of culture and of history simply erased. That is what the leadership of Israel is claiming to be doing. But let us not be mistaken. Israel has been committing genocide even before October the 7th. No, thank you. Look back at the Great March of Return.
You
when
have
Palestinians in Gaza
556?
peacefully protested along the fence separating the strip from Israel, demanding the right to return to their ancestors' land. Israeli snipers opened fire, and they killed indiscriminately, leaving over 266 people dead and injuring 30,000 others, including women, children, and people with disabilities. All of this before October 7th. Now, the next matter the proposition must persuade you of, if you are to vote for this side, is that Israel is an apartheid state. When you hear the word apartheid, what comes to mind is South Africa. That violent, racist, segregated society that led to the term apartheid being coined.
I just sold you your own.
What is most amazing today is that it is South Africa, a nation so familiar with evil and of unjustifiable state oppression that leads the international condemnation of Israel. They know it best, and they say it is an apartheid state, and they say they're committing genocide. No, thank you. Now,
order from the balcony, order. Please do not interrupt while a speaker is speaking. If I see that behavior again, I would have to ask the security to take you out of the chamber. Please. Please, order, please. Please take a seat. Order. Security in the balcony. Can we have order from the balcony? Please, I'm dealing with it. Let me deal with it. Please, thank you. This is the last warning I'm going to give to the balcony. If I see you again interrupting the speakers again, I will ask the security to take you out of the chamber. Thank you. The President, please continue.
Now, I know the opposition likes definitions, so I'll give them one more. The United Nations defines apartheid as inhuman acts committed for the purpose of establishing and maintaining domination by one racial group of persons over any other racial group of persons and systematically oppressing them. Israel's occupation of Palestine matches this picture very well. Barriers, barbed wire, walls, laws, checkpoints, all of these continue to segregate Palestinians in their own land. No, thank you. where they are forced out of their homes and forced to live in a state of continuous fear and insecurity. And this isn't speculation. It is the stated policy of Israel, and it is a policy they're proud of. Ben-Gurion, who's the father of the state of Israel, said in 1948 of the Palestinians, "The old will die and the young will forget." Today, it is Israel's plan to kill both the old and the young. And those they do not kill, they imprison and abuse, as they have done to millions of Palestinians. And this racial oppression of Palestinians is not a coincidence. It is foundational to the idea of Israel. Ben-Gurion also said as much when he described the conception of Israel. He said there are no Arabs, 100% Jews. And today, Netanyahu echoes the same sentiments. He said, Israel is not a state of all of its citizens. It is the nation state of the Jewish people and only them. The 6 million Palestinian descendants of those who were forced out of their homes at gunpoint in 1948 are still not allowed to return. They live in a highly policed poverty in the occupied Palestinian territories that the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights calls an open
I can try this again,
prison.
but...
And even outside of the West Bank and Gaza, Palestinians, both Muslims and Christians, suffer under Israel's apartheid regime, defined by different ranks of citizenship. B'Tselem, which is an Israeli organization, describes Israel as an apartheid state because Palestinian citizens of Israel suffer under a former legal second-class citizen, which affects everything from their voting rights to their ability to get jobs. And this second-class citizenship is entrenched in their basic law, which is the constitutional document of Israel. Again, this is intention. No thank you. Former Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid described the policy as follows. 20% of the population are Arabs. We will not give them national equality because this is the only state that the Jews have. So far from its common conception of being a democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East, Israel demarks itself from all other states in the region by committing atrocities, then boasting of these atrocities with pride on TikTok and X and Facebook.
It's like, it's opposite day.
Ladies and gentlemen, when you vote tonight, you should not just remember the millennia of history
Do you have any bullets
that has been
here?
annihilated. You should not just remember the litany of organizations from the ICJ to the Amnesty International to the United Nations that have condemned Israel time and time again for their genocide and for their apartheid. Or the fact that you vote tonight will be historic. I want you to remember when you walk through those doors tonight that there were lives like that of Sha'ban's, like that of Hind's, like that of Sidra's, that existed yesterday, that will not exist tomorrow. Speak the truth and vote for the proposition. Thank you.
Watch out for them anomalies.
That masquerade as truth. And accusations which are
Starting
intended
to get the
actually
game
to
a little bit.
inflame
Took me
rather
a few
than to
times.
inform. This is a debate which twists the language of justice into a weapon of hate. These claims don't only defame Israel, but they actually insult the memory of true victims of the heinous crimes of genocide and apartheid. And this motion has a reckless disregard for history, law, and truth. These allegations aren't critiques of policies, they're assaults, and above all else, they're an appeal to prejudice rather than reason. They assume that you will believe them because you have been primed by previous slurs against the State of Israel. But I am here tonight to appeal to your sense of reason. I hope that you are better than that you are smarter than that, and that you are more open to hearing different views than that. We will dismantle those falsehoods and expose the hypocrisy and malice of those who wield them. But first I must begin by addressing the very organisation and nature of this debate. The title itself is an outrage, and the speakers are possibly the most aggressive people who the President could have invited. Debate is meant to be a form of discussion that will help people understand one another's point of view. You're right. Debate is designed to enlighten, but this one isn't. It's designed to antagonize for your entertainment.
Yeah, I'm entertained. That's why I'm streaming this.
This isn't my first encounter with this sort of vitriol in this chamber. When I was a student here some 23 years ago, the president then invited the infamous Holocaust denier David Irving to come and speak. The invitation was eventually rescinded after an uproar, but not before I experienced overt and explicit anti-Semitism in the form of jeers and laughter like that in this very room, more or less where that gentleman over there is sitting. Today's president invited a man who justifies the atrocities of October the 7th. Unfortunately, he was too scared to be here tonight, and that psychopath will be here tomorrow instead, unchallenged by debate. We are left instead with someone who called for normalizing massacres as the status quo, someone who called Volodymyr Zelensky a Nazi promoting Zionist, and called to wipe off the state of Israel from the map, and somebody who called Jews sleazy thieves. Clearly, people interested in conflict resolution and peaceful coexistence. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Information cannot be made unless the speaker accepts it.
Point of information, eh?
So here I am again in this very room, once more confronted by plenty of hatred directed at Jews.
12, 15.
These accusations are grotesque. They're not honest criticisms, and they are indeed aimed at the Jewish state. Claims of apartheid and genocide twist history's darkest crimes and use them as weapons against Israel. The accusers themselves are actually guilty of the crimes they allege Israel is committing.
That's what I'm saying.
I have three exceptional colleagues with me tonight who will help me in making this case. Two Arabs with personal experience and biography which will debunk these false allegations of apartheid and genocide, and a legal expert who speaks with international law authority. As for me, I am a proud Jew. My late father was a Holocaust survivor. He was hidden by Catholic clergy in Italy from a regime that sought to deport him for extermination simply because of his race and religion. That is genocide. That is apartheid. And it bears no resemblance to the lies being peddled against Israel tonight. So let's begin with some definitions which Mr. S.T.A.L.K.E.R declined to give. We need to look at the 1948 Genocide Convention and the 1973 Apartheid Convention. These will give us legal definitions, but remember, they're not interested in law, they're interested in big slurs to do big damage. Genocide requires acts intended to destroy in whole or in part a racial, ethnic, national, or religious group. Apartheid entails inhuman acts committed with the intent of establishing and maintaining domination by one racial group over another. Legally, both these crimes hinge on intent. Specific, documented, unmistakable intent. This is not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of law. There is no policy of racial discrimination, no intent to destroy. You will find no documentation of Israeli meetings at government level planning any such thing. The Nazis at their Wannsee conference planned what they called the final solution to the Jewish question. But you will find no Israeli equivalent. You know what you will find? Look in the New York Times. You'll find the minutes of 10 meetings.
They don't like news publications.
You will find in the New York Times the minutes of 10 meetings from Hamas and their Iranian backers and Hezbollah, planning what they called the big plan. That is, the genocidal attack that took place on the 7th of October, 2023. In Rwanda in 1994, radio broadcasts directed civilians to murder their neighbors with machetes. 800,000 people were killed in 100 days. During the Holocaust, my family were subject to racial laws which discriminated against them, deported people for extermination. In Gaza, Israel has no such aim, no such plan, no such action. Instead, Israel does go to extraordinary lengths to try to avoid civilian deaths.
They're wincing as if they've never heard this before.
It cancels airstrikes when there is a risk of excessive
They're
civilian
like kind of
deaths.
pleading ignorance.
There are plenty of documented instances. It issues warnings before airstrikes. Hamas, on the other hand, does hide its weapons, its control centers, in schools, in mosques, in universities, in hospitals. Israel has provided 700,000 tons of food to Gaza during this war.
Why are you shooting at me, bro?
That is a daily average. That is a daily average of 3,200 calories per person. The NHS in this country...
Order! The speaker is excited to be heard. Silence him.
Ooh. So they muted the stream because people are shouting and just acting out of order. I think they said fuck you or something. You got the IDF guy saying get out. This is a fun debate. I mean, it just kind of, this is a really good debate because it's really clearly showing the difference in rhetoric, the difference in tone, and the tension of the reality of, you know, it's really raising pulses. But it does seem like it's, I don't want to say it's another Middle Eastern country with a radical group. That's kind of just, you know, fighting anything Western.
Order! 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 The speaker will be heard. The House will come to order. The member will be taken care of in the welfare room. I will remind the member that there be no recording. Could I have order, please? The speaker will continue.
Good, buddy.
Jonathan, please finish your speech.
I might just say that I understand there are plenty of people in this room who don't agree with us, who don't like us. But this esteemed establishment is meant to be a bastion of free speech, discussion, and debate. And this example is not any of those things. And I urge all of you, I'm here to tell you my side of an argument. I also attended this university, I was a student here, and I understand that part of the experience of being a student is to be challenged by thoughts and facts and information that you may not agree with or you may not like. But to shout like that, to abuse a speaker who is being respectful and giving you their side of an argument is not the way to achieve better knowledge or understanding of anything. I will give all of the proposition speakers their dues.
All right, IDF, chill. Calm down.
Israel has provided 700,000 tons of food to the people of Gaza, which is 3,200 calories per Gazan citizen per day on average. And that is, whether you like it or not, above the NHS recommended amounts for men in this country. Gazans are receiving more food per day
2,000
than the world average
per day
during the war. Madam, if you have a point of information, stand up and make it. Stand up and make it.
Point of order, you may not speak unless the speaker recognizes you. Please let the speaker finish.
I'm letting her speak. What would you like to say, madam? I'm not. The thing is, just because you say so doesn't mean it's true. The reason there are people who are going without food in Gaza is because Hamas stole the food. No, thank you. The UN said that 90 trucks were hijacked last week, and even the BBC reported it. No, thank you. Israel has vaccinated 97% of the Gazan population against polio during this war. You did not catch the Nazis doing that. No. Just because you dislike losing an unnecessary war you started does not make something genocide. The apartheid claim, no thank you. The apartheid claim similarly collapses under scrutiny. Arab citizens in Israel vote, hold office, and serve as judges. Arab judge Salim Jubran sent a Jewish former prime minister to jail. That is not an apartheid. The Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel enshrines equality.
Okay, why did that hurt me? Fuck.
One has to decide in relation to disputed territories whether you apply the law of Israel or different laws to that area. And under the laws of occupation, different laws are frequently applied to a different area. So should you consider it occupied territory, it is bound not to have the same laws. And indeed, with areas A, B, and C in Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, whichever you prefer to call it, there are differences in how people are governed because there was an agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority to try to cede some level of autonomy to the Palestinians. We have seen in Gaza, which is the closest we get to a self-governing Palestinian state, with no Israelis in it, with no Jews in it, with no Jewish corpses in it. They exhumed them when they evacuated, just what the Palestinians used that autonomous area for. It was to attack the Jewish state. Quiet.
Order. Please do not make point of information unless the speaker gives you way.
There is only one Middle Eastern country where Jews and Arabs in great number
So I gotta put them in a container. I can't just
Israel.
grab them. They need radiation suit.
Indeed, it was the attempted moderation and normalization of other Arab states that caused the Palestinians to invade Israel to try to scupper the prospect of a Middle East which could have Jews living peacefully inside it, which other Arab states were pleased to try to embrace.
Show me what you've got.
The society that was built in Gaza reflects the tragic choices that the people and leadership there made. Like all genocidal regimes throughout time, they educated their children for hatred, fostering a culture where ordinary people could be complicit in atrocities against their near neighbors, which is what we saw on October the 7th. Like the Rwandan teacher who bludgeoned children to death by grabbing them from the feet and slamming them against the wall, I watched a Gazan civilian in sandals on his own video footage from his phone trying to decapitate a Thai worker in an Israeli kibbutz using a hoe. This is attempted genocide.
Of the Thai... Of the, how do you say, Thailanders?
Is your argument that Israel, while murdering and taking control of Gaza and Palestinian civilians, is not committing genocide or apartheid because it simply didn't mean to?
It is a perfectly valid question. Israel is not murdering, by the way. Under the laws of genocide, under the legal definitions in the Genocide Convention, it isn't possible to accidentally commit a genocide. Genocide, as I said, genocide requires intent. What you will find if you study genocides is that in all agreed documented historical genocides, the society has visions of a utopic future where the other who is attacked is somehow seen as dirty and inferior, and there is a coordinated plan to try to eliminate them and get rid of them. Collateral damage in a war, however ugly, is not the same thing. No. I will try to make time because I have taken points and there have been a lot of interruptions, and I would like to finish. I appreciate your patience. I simply want to say that all of this genocidal act that took place on October the 7th is the result of a choice for hatred and a choice for apartheid among Palestinians. You will not find Palestinian-controlled territory where Jews are allowed to live. That is apartheid. And this hatred is deeply rooted in a culture which instills from childhood hatred. While Israeli children are taught in schools of a fantasy time when they won't need to serve in the army, or a time, I'm going to finish my entire speech, when there will be a time when they do not need to enter the army, when they will live, in coexistence with their Arab neighbors. It is not the case in Palestinian-controlled lands. I have held in my own hands the UNRWA UN textbooks which teach Palestinians maths with if I have 5 Jews and I kill 3, how many are left?
Nice.
Sit down! Be quiet!
Based.
Be quiet!
It is my job to get the House to order, not the Speaker's job to get the House to order. A point of information should not be made unless the Speaker accepts.
I interviewed a woman who had survived the massacre in kibbutz Nachal Oz. She told me how her husband had run the agricultural work there and employed dozens of Gazan Palestinians who entered Israel every day and earned 5 times what they could in Gaza, helping them to support their families. She said to me, nobody needs to teach us about coexistence because we've been living it for years. After the genocidal attack of October the 7th, she said, we can never do that again. The acts that were carried out by Palestinians on that day set back the cause of coexistence. The hatred that drove those attacks was not motivated by territory or politics. It was religiously based.
Ooh.
The attackers themselves
sounds like religion's kind of cringe.
They proudly streamed videos while they were attacking. Watch the videos. I did. I'll quote, Allahu Akbar. Even if 1,000 of us die for Islam, even if 2,000 die for Islam, the time of the jihad nation has arrived. They weren't calling for peace or coexistence. They weren't calling for 2 states. They were calling for jihad, a holy war aimed at the Jews. No. That is apartheid. That is genocide, and that was not Israeli. So, to close, I'm hoping that in this audience there are some people with open minds. And I'd like you to think critically. It's easy to live in the feedback loop of what you already think you know and believe. It's easy to repeat what you've been told again and again and allow it to reinforce prejudices. But truth often lies outside those loops, in the uncomfortable and necessary area of challenging things you think you know. So tonight I ask you to dig deeper. And I don't want to reduce this debate to slurs and slanders. True discussion and collaboration are only possible among people of goodwill, those who genuinely seek peace and coexistence. And that's why I think we have to reject the people who weaponize these words of justice in order to inflame and divide. Israel's story is not one of apartheid and genocide. It is one of survival against relentless hostility. To see this clearly is to stand for truth and justice and the possibility of peace.
That's pretty good.
Thank you. I mean, you can keep going if you want, but thank you. Appreciate it.
Everybody likes this guy. He's very handsome.
It's good to be here in the Oxford Union, although it doesn't really look like a union. You guys don't look very proletariat.
Maybe he's a commie.
I recently found out this is not a union, but a member society. So I wore a suit. First time. I didn't even wear it to a friend's wedding, so this is a special occasion. But you do what you gotta do. I want to thank you for having us, and I won't be long.
Okay.
Personally, I don't think there's any room for debate in the presence of burning flesh. I don't think there is any room for side conversations while people are being literally burnt alive and incinerated. And the mere notion that we can sit here and ponder and pontificate about a real live stream genocide happening in real time is so arrogant, it's so insensitive, it's so cruel, and it's absurd. The question is, what more do we all need to see to be convinced that this is a genocidal regime waging a genocidal war? Have we not seen enough fathers carrying their children's limbs, their children's remains in shoeboxes and plastic bags? What more images of cruelty must we see to contend with the fact that not only is this a genocide committed by the Israeli regime, but that this very empire is funding it and facilitating it and coddling it.
The British Empire.
And also, if we're really going to talk about
no
debates,
British Empire anymore, buddy.
our opponents, the Zionists, never ever talk about the heart of the issue. We charge them with genocide, we charge them with apartheid, and they tell us, you want to throw Jews into the sea, you want to throw gays from the Eiffel Tower, you want to kill all your women, you beat women, you're misogynistic, you're so on. They say to us, it's the only Jewish state in the world. It's a small country, can you pin it on a map? Why do you single out Israel? They tell us, if the Palestinians lay down their weapons, there would be peace. But if we lay down our weapons, we would be killed. They tell us this, they tell us all kinds of propaganda, simplistic, stupid, silly propaganda points that can be easily repeated by anybody, anywhere. But all of these talking points are not new. They haven't even invented them. They are recycled colonial talking points. We heard them from white Afrikaners. We heard them from in Rhodesia. We heard them all over the world from white supremacists when slavery was getting abolished, when Jim Crow was getting abolished. What happens to the settlers? What happens to the slave owners? What happens to the prison guards? We hear these arguments over and over again, and their arguments to us are always about hypotheticals, about what could possibly happen in the near future. It's about sentiment, about what I feel inside my heart, what I may say about my language, about the offensive things I say. It's never about the material policy-backed systemic things that the Israeli country of genocide commits. The policy-backed discrimination, subjugation, police brutality, ethnic cleansing, dispossession, land theft, decapitation of children. We have seen in the past year children hanging, their limbs hanging from ceiling fans. We have seen brothers carrying their siblings in their backpacks, walking around for miles on end. Even before October 7th, my very house was stolen and taken by Israeli settlers, backed by the Israeli judiciary that is built by settlers and for settlers on the skeletons of Palestinians and funded by tax-exempt, you can sit down, by tax-exempt, by tax-exempt, you can sit down also. You can also sit down. Yes, just sit down. Just sit down. Just by tax-exempt settler organizations registered in the United States of America, and they tell us all kinds of bullshit that we buy. They tell us you use your children as human shields. They tell us you have rockets, you hide rockets and weapons underneath hospitals. And to that I say, and we all should say, that even if Hamas was using people as human shields, which they do not, even if that still does not give you the excuse to kill civilians. Even if.
Interesting, okay. Yeah, that's true. I shouldn't.
Even if we do hide weapons under hospitals, that still does not give you the right to bomb hospitals, killing people, millions of people inside these hospitals. This is not, can you please sit down? Thanks. Just relax, take a Xanax.
Take a Xanax.
يا رب الله تبعي just go.
We also have that right when you're adopting.
There is absolutely nothing that the Palestinian people can do that justifies genocide. More than that, there is nothing that the Palestinian people can do that will make these people no longer want to exterminate us. Because their issue is not with how we exist, but rather their issue is that we exist at all. Their issue is with our existence. Motion passes today, if this motion passes today, it means that this body is catching up to the moral clarity of the global majority, and it is about time and 70 years too late. And if this motion does not pass today, it just means that this is just yet another Western institution that in a decade or so will join the long line of Western institutions that have arrived at epiphanies that we for decades have known and recognized as common truths. That Zionism is irredeemable, that Zionism is indefensible, that is an ideology based and built on ethnic supremacy, on killing, on brutalization, on land theft, and there is no debating that. Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, if girls
Now,
cheered me on for things that I said all day, I'd probably say them.
Was eager to do this event, to say this very message, mainly because I get to wear a suit. But, you know, I think discourse and narrative wars are all fine and good. They're great. But in addition to that, we need to be asking ourselves, what kind of political organizing are we engaged in? What kind of material action are we taking? What kind of direct action are we taking? There is a lot of work to do. Now is not the time to debate. It is time to end genocide. I don't need the ICJ or the ICC, who have confronted that this is genocide. I don't need them to confirm this. And I don't need Amnesty International Human Rights to tell me that it's apartheid. What I need is for you to shut up.
If you make enemies out of everybody, dude, you're never gonna win. I don't know what...
What we need is direct action. What we need is material action, and what we need is to challenge the complicity of our own institutions.
Direct and material action?
This very institution is complicit in the occupation of Palestinians. Now, you know, in the past few, like in the last 2 days, I was informed that a new speaker was added to the opposition, if you can call them that, and I refuse, you know, I think it dishonors me to share a space with someone who, for decades, collaborated with the Israeli intelligence agencies that have killed Palestinians, besieged them, that have given people, that have given people's information and addresses, and have so much blood on their hands. So, shame, absolutely shame. Thank you. And on that note, I want to say Zionism is indefensible, and we will defeat it within our lifetime. And on that note, I'm out. Thank you.
That was it. That was all of the debates that they uploaded for Oxford Union about the Israel-Palestine situation. Amnesty International just released a statement, or I don't know, just something. They're like, yeah, Amnesty International reports that it is a genocide, but they're not an official body. They're just activists. So, I mean, hopefully the thing gets resolved soon. I'm for two states. I'm not for the genocide. I'm not for genocide. I'm not for Israel or Palestine specifically. I'm for the resolution, resolving the solution somehow was that ceasefire. And treaty and building a wall. I mean, there's already a wall, right? So, or getting the other Arab countries within the region to agreeing to supporting Palestine, but they don't even seem to want to support them other than supplying them with weapons. So good luck. That's all I got.